The Smithsonian Faculty Fellowship Program represents a rewarding academic professional development opportunity for faculty at Montgomery College. The fellowships are a product of a unique collaboration between Montgomery College and Smithsonian Center for Education and Museum Studies. It's the first of its kind between the Smithsonian Institution and a community college.
Evelyn Gonzalez-Mills is a professor and counselor at Montgomery College. She teaches the International Student Seminar DS-104, an orientation class for first-year students. She has been the Latino Student Advisor, LSU, at the Takoma Park campus for over 12 years. Several of the LSU members played a leadership role in the passage of the Maryland DREAM Act. Last year, she was selected for the Outstanding Faculty Award. For over a decade, she organized Latino parents in Montgomery County Public School to get them involved in their children's education. She is a member of the Montgomery Sister Cities Board and organized 2 delegations of Maryland residents to El Salvador in 2010 and 2011, which culminated in the first Sister Cities partnership between Montgomery County and Morazán, El Salvador. Salvadorans are the largest immigrant group in the county.
I would like to start by saying thank you to all of you for being here with us, and I know that some of you have been here for a long time. I learned about the Smithsonian Fellowship in 2005, and I knew that I wanted to be a part of it, but I never seemed to have the time to do it. So when I saw last year's theme, Forging America's Identity, Critical Encounters, and Cross-Cultural Exchanges, I just knew that I had to do it. So I thank Mimi and Sarah for accepting my application. I'm particularly very happy of having shared the time a year with my fellow Smithsonian group, and you were all very inspiring for me. And what is going to happen from now on, it's a continuation of that. So thank you. I also wanted to thank Manjula Kumar because I see her as a beacon of light in the care that she took of guiding us through the Smithsonian experience. So that was, I'm very thankful to her. The part that talked to me more was identity. I'm a transnational, originally from El Salvador. So I actually have a very active life in El Salvador because I travel every year. But I also have my life here. So the issue of identity, I face it all the time. It's like I have to define who I am, either with one group or the other. And also, I was interested in the topic of the colonization, 1492 to the present, because I'm interested in the dynamics of the colonizers, the enslaved, the wealthy and the dispossessed, the immigrants, and the natives, all these different aspects of the topic that we have. And so the title of my project is America's Identity, Looking Inside Out or Outside In. Who are we? And because the majority of students in my class are African immigrants, I decided to focus on learning more about the relationship between the two groups, African Americans and African immigrants. I always wonder, they have the same roots. Do they relate to each other? Do they talk to each other? Do they identify with each other? So those are some of the questions that I have for them and I wanted to find out. I teach the International Student Seminar. The main goal of this program is to help students adjust to the new educational system, particularly Montgomery College, and also to a new culture. So the objectives that I had, first is I wanted to raise the students' understanding of their own experience as they transition into the new culture. We talked about identity issues, immigration, about the experience of culture shock and the adjustment process. And it seemed like many things made sense to them, you know, like now I understand why I'm feeling this way or that way. Another objective that I had is to increase the students' understanding of the history of African Americans. Because sometimes we assume, you know, we know, but we don't. And then also I wanted to examine the relationship between the two groups. So the activities and assignments that I planned, first of all, I had to start with a visit to the library. Part of what we do with our students is to have them understand all the support services, all the programs that we have, you know, honors programs, scholarships, the different learning resources. So for me, the library is a crucial aspect. And especially the librarians are the most helpful people that I have found. Mm-hmm. You know, without them, I wouldn't have gone through the Smithsonian experience. So I also had some readings for the students in preparation for the presentation of the history of African Americans in the US and the African American student panel. Then we were going, of course, after all that hard work, we had to visit the Smithsonian. I chose the National Museum of African Art because it was the one that I felt closer to with the topics that we were going to, you know, talk about. And finally, students were going to write a paper and give a class presentation, you know, related to the theme that we were talking about. After the library visit, and thanks to Sarah's idea, I did start by having the students look at the online resources that the museum has. I myself had never checked, you know, the different collections they had. So this student chose a photograph of this girl, who she felt embodied the richness of the ethnicity, the different cultures of Africa, and the beauty of women from Africa. Thanks to the help of Professor Carl Smith, we selected 3 readings. One was David Walker's Appeal to the Colored Citizens of the World. And this reading basically is a call for them to rise up and to revolt against slavery. And he condemned slavery all his life. The other reading was from the perspective of the white slave owners, was The Rules of Highland Plantation. And basically, this is a series of articles about how to manage the slave labor. And finally, the third one is a letter by a fugitive slave, Joseph Taper, who fled Virginia and ran to Pennsylvania. But knowing that he wasn't safe there, he decided to go all the way to Canada. And he sent a letter to one of his friends back in Virginia. And he said that he had never, in 1 month of being in Canada, he had experienced more pleasure than all his life here in the US. So after these readings, we had students think about what race meant to them, to think about the history of slavery in the US, to talk also about minorities in their home countries, you know, how are they treated, just to bring a little more consciousness of, you know, the dynamics, and also to think about similarities and differences between immigrants and African Americans, and to also talk about African Americans, because that's the community that when we come to the US, usually we go into their space. You know, are they better off than other groups of people in US society today or not? So we wanted them to think about that. So When we planned this visit by Professor Smith to talk about the history of African Americans and to bring some African American students to serve as a panel, I had no idea what was going to happen. You know, I shared that with my group, and they said the only thing you can do is, you know, plan it. And I actually was surprised at the level of maturity, empathy, and honesty that the group had. They wanted more. You know, they wanted to come back. We talked about slavery. We talked about racism, you know, and what they had experienced. And it was kind of, you know, very touching when students say, you know, our ancestors, and actually they said we, you know, and I'm assuming their ancestors went through brutal conditions here in the US. And they talked about how that experience still affected the African American family today. We talked about identity. And, you know, African American students, I'm sorry that I didn't keep their names, you know, to refer to them with their name. But they talked about, you know, our ancestors were taken from their motherland. And we don't know where we came from, you know. If I knew where, you know, my ancestors came from, it would be different. I would feel more connected, and I would feel, you know, more involved and engaged. Students talk also about the prejudice that there is between the groups, you know, immigrants and African Americans. But they also talked about the friendships that they have made. They talked about tasting different food that they never thought that they would. They talked about learning a dance, you know, and passing as, you know, part of a different country. And what I saw also was an effort to connect, you know, talking about we have the same roots, you know, so we need to be talking more. So that was really nice. With the part related to, you know, the social economic status of African Americans in relation to the other groups, there was a consensus, you know. African Americans still live in segregated conditions. They still have, you know, low-paying jobs or unemployed. And of course, you know, whites, of course, are at the top. Latinos are right there, you know, hand in hand with African Americans. And that's another thing that we haven't really made the connection, you know. We have focused on the conflict, but not on the things that bring us together. So there is a lot of conversation that needs to happen, I think, different places. We also talked about, and we actually studied different variables related to, you know, the economic, political, religious, associational, residential areas where people live, and things like that. And the African immigrant tend to move faster into the middle class and to live also in white neighborhoods where the services and the quality of education is you know, much better, you know, and those are advantages for the group. Asians, of course, we know, tend to rise to the top in every aspect. So finally, after a lot of work and they were preparing their, you know, papers, doing research, it was time for us to visit the museum. And I selected the National Museum of African Art because I kind of looked for some permanent exhibitions related to the African American experience, and I didn't find something that I felt was, you know, that I could really use. So, and the good thing about the African American Museum, as you know, you saw all the pieces that Lincoln presented. You know, the students could actually, I mean, they grew up with some of these pieces. You know, they were not in the museum, but they were very familiar. And also, I was pleasantly surprised that the museum recently has acquired this statue of Toussaint Louverture, I think that's how it's pronounced. Do you know who he was? Some of you do now, right? He's considered the father of Haiti and a hero because he, with an army of slaves, he was able to defeat the British, the Spanish, and the French army over a period of over 12 years. And I understand that this rebellion of the Haitians was the only successful uprising in the history of slavery. I guess I could be corrected on that, but that's what I read. We also, students brought, their children, their spouses, their grandchildren, their parents. They also, I asked them to pick, to relate to one of the artifacts in the museum. And Mohammed, who's originally from Senegal but was born in Saudi Arabia, he said his grandfather was a hat maker. So he picked that one and he felt very proud. Genet, who's from Ethiopia, she was very proud that they had information about, Ethiopia. And she was proud because Ethiopia is the only country in Africa that was not colonized, according to, what I know and what she said. And this is a shield that the Ethiopian army used to fight the Italians, who even last century, as early as last century in the 1900s, they tried to, take it over again. To take it over. We learned where students came from, and these are some of the perceptions about the students about the visit to the museum. First of all, Mohammed, he said, my family is from Senegal originally, but I never heard of Osman Sow, the artist. So for him, it was very important to have known of somebody that he can be proud of. Meskerem said that for her, it was like a dictionary where we can learn more about African culture and African history. And finally, I'm getting there, students had to write the paper, give the class presentation, and share what they learned with everybody. And I just want to conclude with this, with Meskerem's conclusion that she decided to tackle this relationship between African Americans and African immigrants. And what she said is that African Americans do not know the chaos that, sometimes they come from, the difficulties that they face in their own countries. And many of them, she said, don't know of the hardships that African Americans have gone through, and that perhaps this common experience can bring them together. So, thank you so much.